My name is Jenessa. When I was in my early 20s, I did some community theater, and in one of my favorite plays, a comedy called Drop Dead, I played Candy Apples, which was an ex-porn star from Brooklyn. And I spent pretty much my entire time up on stage in my underwear, and somehow this is way more terrifying than doing that was. If you've ever done anything up on stage, you'll know it's a lot different than coming up and talking about yourself personally. For one thing, there's usually a bunch of bright lights which are right in your face, and so it obscures the audience from view, whereas I can see all of you very clearly right now. You have a script of lines that you've memorized for probably a few months. You have a director that's choreographed every single one of your moves. With any luck, you've got other people up on stage with you. But most importantly, you have a role to play. You have this character to hide behind, and the person you are essentially disappears. And unfortunately, that's what happened to me in my own life. I became a character in my own story, and I disappeared. I'm originally from a small island on the west coast of BC. It's called Texada Island. Most people have never heard of it. To give you a little bit of an idea of what it's like there, it's about 1,200 people. It's a bit like if you took beachcombers, and I always feel like I'm dating myself when I make a scene. Only a couple people know what beachcombers is. But beachcombers, corner gas, and trailer park boys, and you smash all of those together, that is what Texada is like. It is a place where most people have nicknames like Swampy, Bison, Stump, Grouse, Goober. These are all members of my family. It's a place where you can easily be defined by what you do, who your parents are, what you were like as a kid. And don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful, stunning place to grow up. I have a lot of strengths, I think, in my character because of being raised on this island. But it's not the easiest to have experiences. It's isolated, and it's not the best place to be exposed to new people. So here I am at this young age when I'm sort of trying to figure out who the heck I am when I meet someone. And I end up in the spell of this incredibly unhealthy, toxic relationship. It was a relationship where there was no safe space to authentically be myself. And so what happened was I disappeared. I went on autopilot and I stopped as a person. And that happened just a little bit at a time. It happened with hiding things here and making excuses there. And saying no when I wanted to say yes, and yes when I wanted to say no. And it meant keeping good people away, because you can't authentically connect with people when you're hiding parts of your life from them, or when you're not being honest with yourself. And so I adopted a role. I set the lines, I moved the way I was told, just like I had learned to do on stage. Now, I still had great joy in my life. I traveled a little bit, I had 2 beautiful children, I earned my CPA designation, but I was not living a life that I was meant to. And I like to think of it as a lot like if you've ever been to the west coast of Vancouver Island, and you'll see the way the trees will grow, but they grow in the wind, and they grow completely bent backwards. And I was growing in a life that I didn't know how to get out of. In 2012, I moved here to Cochrane, and even though I swore like any good West Coaster that I was never, ever going to live in Alberta, but I was desperate for a change. I mean, sometimes in our lives, we cling to this idea that if we mix things up enough, that it will somehow magically make things better, or at the very least, that it'll create an opportunity that wasn't there before. And so I was surprised at how much I fell in love with Cochrane. I loved the energy of this town, the wide open spaces and the big sky. It just made me feel like anything was possible here. And I liked being anonymous. I mean, from a small town, I liked the fact that I could go to the grocery store and not have 15 conversations about the new RCMP officer or what Chicken Coop Bob had just got in trouble for, and that is a real person, by the way, or the fact that they were painting the red community hall teal and yellow. And how are we going to call it the red hall if it's now teal and yellow? And 15 years later, I feel like people are still driving by that hall and they're like, oh, those colors. They're so upset about those colors. And well, being anonymous was kind of nice for a little while. Eventually it got old, because when I felt invisible in my own life, suddenly being invisible in this town was more than I could bear. And my children, even though they were little, they were starting to become more aware. And I had to really think about, I wanted to be seen, and how did I want them to see me? So there were a great many things that happened between moving here and in 2015, when I finally got out from underneath my marriage and found myself going through a hellfire of a divorce and pretty much on my own with 2 children. That was ground zero for my healing journey. And healing sucks, and it's so much work. And when you have kids, it can feel that much harder. I like to think of it as trying to put a dress on a cat while doing complex math equations in your head. And so I cried. I cried a lot. And I was lucky I had a great job, because I would close my door and cry in my office, and I would cry while I was driving, and I would cry while I was on the train, which, if you've ever taken the train, is not such a strange thing to see. And I picked up this saying from my mom for crying in the sink. I don't know if it's an English thing maybe, and I used to say it. And I remember one night my daughter was she's sitting and she's coloring at the kitchen table, and I must have stubbed my toe or dropped something, but I remember saying, for crying in the sink. And she doesn't even look up. She just goes, no, Mommy, you cry in the bathroom. I'm like, that is true. Because, again, if you're a parent, one of the few places you can catch a break is to go to the bathroom. And so I would go in there to just process a thought, to read a message, or to cry, obviously. But I think the kids started to get really frustrated with this, because I'd be in there and they'd come along and they'd bang on the door and they'd say, what are you doing in there? What's taking you so long? So I learned to respond with, I have diarrhea. And this bought me some time, because clearly they backed away from the door. But then I think they were worried about, well, this is true, she's in there a lot. And so they would come back and they'd bang on the door and they'd say, it doesn't sound like you have diarrhea. So now not only am I crying in the bathroom, but I'm also going and flushing the toilet every now and then, so that they actually think I have diarrhea. But when I finally came out of the bathroom, it was here in this incredible town, and that I really started to take my life back. I was like Jim Carrey in the movie Yes Man, if you ever saw that. But he just goes around and says yes to everything, mostly because he had to. But so I said yes to going to the dollar store and buying canvases and painting. Yes to going down to the guitar house when it was still downtown and getting my guitar and teaching myself how to play and write songs. Yes to drinks with friends and signing up for things like Elevate. Yes to boxing and sitting by the river and going out and eating ethnic food that actually gave me diarrhea. And one of the most sort of significant memories for me in what I call my yes phase is I went down to Cochrane Home Treasures, and I finally had my own space. I had my own home, and I felt safe in it, and I could decorate it and make it whatever I wanted. And I always loved the color teal. And it was like the universe knew I was coming, because I got teal everything. And I remember going home and putting up teal lamps and putting away teal dishes, and there's probably in hindsight a lot of teal. I just remember shouting to the room, I'm taking my life back one fucking teal throw pillow at a time. And that's how it goes. I mean, the way we lose ourselves often is just a little piece at a time. And the way we come back to ourselves is often a little piece at a time. And none of it is insignificant. Not crying in the bathroom and pretending you have diarrhea, or the teal throw pillows if that's important to you. And I feel like I've kind of given you like a really rushed, high-level account of my losing myself and finding myself, so I apologize if it's been a bit vague. But I wanted to share 3 of sort of my aha moments, I don't know, but like 3 important things to me from my sort of healing journey. And the first one is, like I said earlier, healing sucks. It's hard. And I like to think of it, I used to do the Ride for MS, Leduc to Camrose. And if you're not familiar with it, it's riding 185 kilometers over 2 days, Leduc to Camrose and back. And I had this really shitty day 2 of riding once. There was a 25-kilometer-hour headwind blowing in our faces, and healing is like that day in that it's cold, and it's hard, and you're tired, and you're hungry, you're cranky, you're emotional, everything hurts. You feel like you're actually moving backwards instead of moving forwards, and you just want to quit. You want to quit so bad, and you can at any time you can. But if you just keep riding, ultimately you're riding for a good cause, and you will get to where you're going. But there's no final destination with healing. You just kind of hope that the weather gets better and that there are less hills. And that leads me to my second thought, which is that crying to me is like yoga for your heart. It just loosens everything up, and I feel like we should do it often. I had this quote that I liked that said, when you can tell your story and it no longer makes you cry, you've healed. And this was something I strived for, like this final destination. And I had it written on a Post-it note. And the truth is, I think it's total bullshit. Because, I mean, we cry when we watch fictional characters in movies. Or in my case, I cry during emotional commercials. And I think it's fair to assume that we're always going to hold some empathetic space in our hearts for our former selves and our stories. And crying doesn't mean that you are broken or that you are unhealed. It just means that you're human. And lastly, part of being human is accepting that anything that has ever happened to you is always going to be a part of who you are. I can't change any part of my story. I can't change where I'm from. I can't change mistakes I've made. I can't change the things that I missed out on, or the things that I didn't do, or who I married. I have to accept all of it, along with the amount of times I've cut my own bangs, which is always a terrible idea. I am a melting pot of emotions and memories and experiences, and to be honest, I wouldn't want to change anything, because to change one thing might mean that I didn't have my kids, or that I didn't end up in this province and in this town, where I believe I've become the mother, the sister, the daughter, and the friend that I was meant to be. And I wanted to do this thing where I held up a piece of paper and I said, this represents all the things that have ever happened to me in my life. And I wanted to impress you with my origami skills and show you that you can take your story and your experiences and fold them into something new and beautiful. But when I practiced that was really stressful. And so I cheated and I brought a pre-made crepe. So I wanted this to represent my something new and beautiful. And Cochrane and the people and the services and this town are forever folded up in my something new and beautiful. And I am so grateful for that. Thank you.